Welcome everybody. My name is Rich Klein. I'm a sales engineering manager here at Salesforce.com, and we are thrilled to have everybody on the line. Today we're going to be talking about customer service, and this is our first in a series of 3 webinars. We're very excited to have our featured speaker, Francoise Tourniaire, founder of FT Works, which is a boutique consulting company specializing in tech support. She's been doing it for 20 years, and she's a frequent contributor to support conferences and industry press. So we'll be hearing from her in just a moment. A few housekeeping pieces. Obviously, because we have a large number of people on the line, we're not able to open up the phone lines, but we are very much enthusiastic about hearing from you via the chat. So the way that you do that is you click on the private tab and send your questions to the leaders and assistants. And during the call, we will be taking questions or chat questions and posing them to Francoise. We have a special bonus. Francoise is actually going to pick the best question that she gets from her audience, and we're going to reward a $25 Amazon gift card. At the end of the event, we are going to do a survey, and again, we're going to pick one lucky winner for an Amazon gift card. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Francoise, and I hope you enjoy our content today.
Thank you very much, Rich. So my name is Francoise, FT. I know I have too many letters, too many vowels in my name. I am the owner of FT Works. I founded FT Works in 1998, and what we do is we help technology companies set up and improve their support operations. So very much the theme of today's talk. I used to have a real job before I became a consultant. I was the VP of Service for Scopus, which was a CRM company. And then prior to that, I worked for many years in support at Sybase and Ingress. I have written 4 books. The first one, The Art of Software Support, talks about managing support operations. The second, Just Enough CRM, talks about selecting tools for support. The third one is about managing knowledge in support organization, and the latest one talks about support marketing and how to sell support. So all of these themes will recur over the course of our talk today. So what are we going to talk about? We are going to talk about how to get started on the right foot, as it were, in support. This is going to address issues that you may have if you have maybe a small support organization, you're starting out, things are still fairly casual, you're wondering whether to formalize your process. This discussion is definitely for you. If you have nothing at all, if you're just starting out, you're wondering whether you should start hiring people in support, you should start defining some of the ways that you do things, this is also the discussion for you. And our overarching theme is that I am absolutely convinced that you can deliver great support with a small organization. Often clients come to me and they are worried. They say, oh, you know, FD, we're small. We can't do all of these complicated things that the big guys can do. How can we ever succeed? Not a concern at all. Actually, I believe that small support organizations can be much more successful sometimes than the large ones because, oh, they don't have the same resources, etc., but they also have the great advantage of knowing their customers very well and being able to deliver very personalized service. So don't have any hang-ups about being small. It's good. You can really delight your customers even though you do not have a huge organization. So I'm trying to give you some inspiration on how to do it, but I also would like to be very practical. So if you would like, the best way to follow along is to create your to-do list as I speak, right? So as you hear things that are inspiring to you, then jot them down, right? And by the end of the hour, you're going to have your very own checklist of things to do. With that, let's get started and look at some theoretical aspect of support. You may never have thought of it that way, but if you think about it, support is really a giant loop. So we have the customer on one side, we have the support people on the other. And what the customer is doing essentially is making a request, right? Then we, from the support angle, we deliver a commitment. In other words, a promise, right? We promise to help the customer. Sometimes we say no, right? Sometimes we say, oh, what you're asking is bizarre and strange, and that's just not what we do, right? But in general, we say yes, of course. So we make a commitment, and then we deliver some kind of completion, some solution, some answer to the request, right? And then the customer then thanks us or tells us it's not quite what I wanted, right? But the customer then delivers some assessment of their level of satisfaction, right? Now notice that this loop can be conceived of in an assisted support type of scenario where I go to my supplier and I talk to a person and the person delivers and answers to me. But it could also be a self-service loop, right? I make a request, I have a question, I find my answer, right? So think about the loop both on the macro level and the micro level. If you think about it, the relationship of the customer is all about customers making requests and we fulfilling the requests. And also you can think of that in a very micro level as you are having individual conversations with customers, right? So what should we remember from this? Support is all about closing loops. Okay, one more theoretical aspect before we plunge into action items. And what you can see on the slide now is the 5 layers of support. The 5 layers of support represents essentially the methodology that we use at FTWorks. And what it means is that when you look at any support organization of any size, supporting any type of product or service anywhere around the world, you will have to worry about those 5 layers. Of course, you're going to have to worry about the strategy piece that's off to the left-hand side as well. But you essentially have to worry about those 5 layers. The first layer is your offerings. What I mean here is support offerings. And we'll see much more detail in a couple slides about this. But the idea is, what is the promise that you're making to customers? Are you going to deliver support during the daytime? Are you going to deliver support on weekends? Are you going to deliver support via chat or phone, right? So that's what I mean when I talk about support offerings. Now, above that, there is the process layer. And if you think about it, the process layer is how we are going to deliver against the promise. Right? So I promised my customers I'm going to deliver, say, 24/7 support, right? How do I create a process by which I can be pretty much guaranteed that around the clock the service will be delivered to them? Of course, process is a very, very important support. Support is essentially a very large machine. You turn the crank every day, and you need to know how to actually turn that crank. Third layer is people. I obviously have a great fondness for people in support because that's where I've spent my entire career, and people are very important. But notice that people are located here. The people layer is located above the process layer. In other words, you should think about process before you think too much about people, right? Because the process is going to inform what kind of requirements you have in terms of people, requirements of skill type, requirements of headcount, right? So always think about processes first, just like we always think about offerings first before we think about processes. Then we come to the tool layer. So tools obviously are very important. When we talk about tools later in the talk, you will hear how modern tools are just absolutely fantastic. I've been in the support field for a long, long time, and life has never been better than it is today when it comes to tools. And one of the things that tools can do, obviously, is inform the top layer, which is metrics. I imagine that on this call we have a number of executives who are very concerned about, well, how do we measure success of the support operation, right? And indeed, that's a very important component, and I would suggest that as we get started talking about best practices, one of the first things you want to do is to define in advance what kind of metrics are you going to shoot for, and how are you going to measure that. Okay, so 5 layers of support. These 5 layers are important to you as you get started, but they are important to the largest support organizations in the world. It's always the same 5, right? You don't think of them quite in the same way. The level of sophistication applied to these 5 layers is very different, of course, if you have a 3,000-person support organization as compared to a 3-person organization. But they're always the same 5 layers. And if you feel stuck at any time with your support organization, go back to the 5 layers and say, how am I doing with offerings? How am I doing with processes? And so on. And that will be fantastic inspiration. All right, enough theory. Let's get going. So the way this talk is organized is around the 7 steps that you can see on the slide, right? I will describe them very briefly now, and then we will go into exquisite details. And just a reminder that you can ask questions at any time on the chat, and I will address them as we get to the proper section. So the 7 steps. Step 1, assign a support owner. That should be fairly obvious, but support sometimes is considered to be a 5th wheel, right? And you really do need somebody who thinks about support. Now, it doesn't mean go out today and immediately hire a VP of support in a small operation. Doesn't make sense, right? But you need somebody who is going to look after support and who is going to drive the initiatives and is going to coordinate the processes from the get-go. Secondly, you need to define your scope of support. Remember the bottom layer of the 5 layers of support offerings? That's what I mean. You need to define what is it you're going to do. How far are you going to get to go for your customers? What are you going to deliver? What's the promise you make to customers? The next 3, so steps 3, 4, and 5, design the knowledge strategy, design the resolution process, consider support communities. That's all about process definition. So that's the next layer of the 5 layers. And those are 3 essential components of any support organizations. I will start with knowledge strategy because it is the most important one. May not have been the one you thought about first, but it is the most important one. Step number 6 is the tool. So that obviously is very important. As I said before, processes are more urgent and important than tools, so that's why we talk about processes first. And then finally, metrics. And when we talk about metrics, we'll talk about how to create an integrated set of metrics. I just want to plant the idea in your brains right now. There is no one number that is going to tell you everything you want to know about support. That's not possible. So you need to have a composite picture. So 7 steps. All right. Now, if you already have a support organization, you may feel that you have already accomplished some of those steps. Good for you, right? If there are some that you have never thought about, then definitely you need to pay attention to that. Do we have a question, Rich?
Francoise, we do have a question from the phone, and it was from Raul. He was basically asking, in these 7 steps, are you putting them in priority order? And, can you skip any, or is it required that you need to do all of them?
Okay, that's a very good question. I see that the competition for the $25 is starting, huh? All right, so am I putting them in priority order? I am putting them in an order of when you should look at them. In other words, you should have a support owner before you start defining the scope of support, or at least roughly at the same time. In other words, if you don't have a support owner, I think the rest of your life is going to be very difficult, right? If you do not define your scope of support, oh my, God help you. Okay, so I do think that there is a certain order. Can you skip any of them? what does you mean by skipping? If you say by skipping, I don't ever look at it and I don't think it's important, I think that would be kind of silly. If by skipping you mean, well, I look at it and I think, well, at this time, I don't really want to do this and I have a good reason for it, why not? For example, I considered support communities and I considered that I don't want to do it. Good for you. Just revisit every 6 months or so. But I would not just skip without thinking about it.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
All right, so let's move on to the first step, which is assign a support owner. So a support owner, to me, is very important. You really need to have somebody, first of all, at the executive level who has ownership for support, so you can have the visibility at that level. Support is terribly important. We see every day that people leave suppliers because of a support issue. Now, that doesn't mean once a customer has a support request, they will leave. That's not at all what I mean. What I mean is somebody has an issue, it is not taken care of, that is a very large cause of customer defection. Right? So you need somebody at the executive level. Now, you may have a limited number of executives, so it could be a part-time owner, somebody who's doing something else. That's totally fine. If we're talking about the hands-on owner, then you really want to have someone who has support experience if possible. But the bottom line is most of support is common sense. Most of support is things that reasonable people would do, right? The way I like to look at it is you may never have had a title of VP of support, director of support, support manager or whatnot, but you all customers of somebody, right? You're customers of the phone company, you're customers of your car repair shop. You know something about support because you've experienced it, right? So you can use that. The two characteristics I would say are most important for support owners, and we'll see later support reps, are one, great customer contact. If you have somebody in your organization whose goal in life is to stay in his cube and never venture out, this is not going to be a good support person. There's a lot of customer contact in support. And then the second thing is organizational skills. Support is a big machine, right? There's a big operational component, so you really want someone who, like the woman I have in the picture, can have blueprints and schedules and knows how to run operations. Okay, one last thought about the support owner. If what you're supporting is relatively low complexity, it is absolutely possible to have a completely hands-on support owner at first who both handles customer issues and also manages the team. If you are supporting very complex products that require very high technical skills, not such a good idea. You will have a hard time finding somebody with those two sides, so you probably want to separate the managerial part from the hands-on part. So that's step one. Assigning a support owner. Step two, this is where the fun begins. Defining the scope of support. So everybody needs to do this, whether you are going to be selling your support or support just comes in for free. You need to define what it is you're going to do for support. You need to do that for yourselves so you don't go crazy. And you need to do that for customers because you need to set expectations. And the way to set expectations with customers is certainly to tell them this is what we're prepared to do for you. So what does this include? It includes very simple things like hours of support. Are you going to do business hours support? Are you going to do 24 hours, 24/7 support? Are you going to be open on holidays, right? All those are decisions that you need to make up front. Now, how do you do that? When you're small, even when you're big, but especially when you're small, you really want to keep the hours as short as possible to still meet the needs of your customers, right? But not kill yourself because you don't have a lot of staff, right? So what do I mean by that? I'll give you an example. I have a client who sells systems that are used in doctor's offices. Okay. Now think about doctor's offices that you visited recently. Doctor's offices tend to be open during the week, during business hours, right? And many of them are open on Saturday mornings, it turns out, right? Not very many doctor's offices are open on Sunday. So what this particular client decided is that the regular hours of support are business days plus Saturday mornings, right? That's smart because it meets the customer needs, right, without destroying their ability to provide support, right? So you may not be supporting doctor's offices, but think about who is it that you're supporting, and then it would give you a good idea of, do you need evening hours, do you need weekend hours? And even if you need to deliver what we call off-hours support, right? So outside of business hours, you may not need to do that within the office, for example, right? You could have somebody on a cell phone maybe that's answering questions if the volumes are low. So think that through, right? Be minimalist and be realistic with what it is that your customers would want. Okay, second point, support channels. So are you going to answer customers' calls? Are you going to take their emails? Are you going to have a portal on the web? Are you going to have chat sessions? The answer is pretty much the same, by the way, as for hours of support. Do as little as you can get away with, right? The phone is notorious as a channel that's hard to staff because you pretty much need to have somebody available to answer phone calls as they occur, right? Contrast that with email. If you're doing email support, then you can certainly answer several hours later, right? So it gives you a lot more flexibility. Now, I don't like email, and I don't think you should like email in this day and age because email is very unstructured. You really should be using a web portal instead. And those two things have the same advantages when it comes to speed of response. And then chat, it can be a wonderful tool as well if you're trying to help people resolve issues on the spot. Like the phone, you pretty much need a near synchronous response, so be careful about that. Which brings us to response time targets. So for the phone, your response time targets will probably be something like less than 2 minutes wait or something like that. But for electronic requests, you have a lot more leeway. I tend to see right now that 24 hours is absolutely something you must do. 4 hours is better, right? So think that through with your organization, and remember, you need to always be under-promising, over-delivering, right?
We have a question from Phil. He wants to go all in, 24/7, 365. What are some of the issues that he should be thinking about as it relates to defining the scope of support?
All right, Phil. I admire courage and bravery. So sometimes you do have to go 24/7 and 365, right? I would say the bulk of my customers are 24/7 support. So things to think about. You need to be ready to staff, obviously, around the clock, right? That means that you need to staff the difficult parts to staff at nighttime, weekends, and especially holidays, okay? Because let's face it, people do not like to work at those hours, right? So here are some ideas. One is look at volumes. If your volumes are low, you can staff out of office with a cell phone, right? A lot of my clients do that. It works very well, and it is very well accepted by customers. So think about that. You don't necessarily need to be in office. Now, Phil, I have no details on your operation, but another way to think about this is to use what we call follow the sun in support. So the idea of follow the sun is if you have offices in different geographies, then you can leverage these people to work at hours that Americans would not love to work at because they would normally be asleep. Right? So right now it's, 10-something in the morning in California. People are wide awake, easy to have people working, right? But as it turns to be 6 or 7 p.m. Pacific time, if you had an office in, say, Australia, they would be awake, right? And they would be more than happy to speak with customers in the US, and they would have a lovely Australian accent, and life would be good. And then after their shift is over, we can go to somebody in Europe, right? So that's follow the sun. That's the other idea, right? And then the other idea is to think about holidays in a flexible way, right? If you must have a 365, you must have a 365. But sometimes there are certain days that even customers who are quite demanding may accept something less than full support. So look at that. People on cell phone, people on duty, and follow the sun. Those are the two main ideas for 24/7.
And Mickey had a question around the idea of no on email. So they heard you loud and clear on that. Why? And I heard the unstructured part, but the follow-on part was, what's so great about a web portal?
Okay. So no on email. I'm fairly rabid about that, and I really think that the time of email maybe has gone as a support input channel, right? I'm not saying kill email. I love email, just for support input. So there's the structure piece, which is in email. Anybody who has worked in a support organization has seen emails that say something like, "This thing is broken, help me." Hello, thank you. This is really great. This is a really good way for me to resolve your problem. You gave me nothing to go on, right? And I just don't know even where to start. So that's the problem of the lack of structure in email. If the types of problems that you have to solve tend to require some backup information or details, you can very easily ask for that on a web portal, and it's really impossible to do that in email. So that's why I say that email is just not the best channel. Now, it all depends, right? The right answer to everything is it depends, because it depends on your customers. But think about it 3 times before you decide to adopt email.
Okay, that's great. So it's also a great tie-in to our next session, where we're really going to be implementing these best practices, and obviously Salesforce offers something we call web to case. So this is functionality where we can provide this structured capability. So tune in 2 weeks, September 8th, for really a deep dive into how tools can help with this concept.
Yeah, I think if you have a reasonable tool, we'll talk about the tool in a little while, you should not even be worrying that much about email, right? There should be no reason for you to not have a good portal. All right, so I want to go a little bit faster maybe on response time target and resolution time targets. Again, the idea of response time is when you're going to get back to the customer on a request. Today, I would say for email or electronic, you should be thinking in terms of no more than 24 hours. If you want to be great, world-class support, you really should be thinking in terms of probably 4 hours. Resolution time targets are not something that you want to necessarily publish to customers. Think about it. But it's something that you need to have internally to your organization. And the resolution time depends on the complexity of the types of problems that you're resolving in support. For my highly complex customers, they usually have a target of something like 80% resolved in a week, something like that, right? For a non-complex support, you should target probably a day, 2 days maybe, with the goal of resolving as many issues as possible on the first interaction. And then you need to define what types of questions will you answer. Typically, you will answer questions that are related to the direct use of your product or service. You will not be providing consulting to customers, for example. And then it is not on the slide because I know it doesn't relate to everybody, but if you're going to be selling support, then you need to think about pricing and positioning. And of course, that's another layer of complexity on top of that. But everybody, even if your support is completely free, everybody has got to define hours, support channels, response time, resolution time type of questions answered. You have to answer that for yourself. Whew, that was the first layer. Let's go on to the second layer, which is about processes. And we'll talk about 3 aspects here. We'll talk about the knowledge management, we'll talk about case resolution, and we'll talk about communities. So in terms of knowledge management, I put this this step before the case resolution because the smart support manager knows that it's more important to manage knowledge than it is to resolve cases. Okay? What does that mean? What it means is that if you can get the right amount of information to the right person at the right time, that's how you're going to win the support game. That's true for internal users, it's true for external users. So what do you do about that? Well, you have a knowledge strategy. Okay? And the beauty of having a knowledge strategy is because it's going to give you both better productivity and customer sat. Isn't that nirvana? Yeah, that's support nirvana. That's what we're all about in support, right? High productivity and high customer sat. So you want to have a strategy for how you're going to do this, right? The goal of the knowledge management function is to have a knowledge base that's both complete and correct at all times. Don't worry, you will never get there. So it's a goal, right? It's what you're shooting for. And what you want to do is to start small and build up. Now, if you have the right tool, that will be very easy because the discipline is to simply look at what kind of questions the customer is asking today. Oh, they're asking about X, Y, and Z. Let's write a little FAQ or tech note or whatever you want to call it in your environment about X, Y, and Z. And tomorrow we start again. Oh, tomorrow they're asking still about X, Y, and Z, but now they're asking about A, B, and C. Okay, we're going to write something up about A, B, and C. And that's the way you make it happen. You constantly are fixing your knowledge base, or updating your knowledge base with new information. And you are going to want to do this in the customer language. So the worst problem I see here with my clients is people who are trying to be perfect. Right? So they say, well, you know, we're not quite ready to deploy the knowledge base because it's not complete. It will never be complete. Just deploy what you have and every day add to it by looking at your experience. So don't be scared about the knowledge base. It's just something you work out every day. All right, now here's something to be scared about. What is this flowchart? What does it mean? Well, it means that you need to look at your resolution process. So the resolution process is very simple. It's how you take customer requests and get them an answer. Very, very simple. There are 2 ways to do it. And I know you can't necessarily decipher this thing, and that's good because that way it forces you to think, right? So there are 2 ways to deliver support. One is the tiered model. In the tiered model, if I get a question from a customer and I do not know how to answer it, then I just kick it out to the next level, level 2, a backline or whatever you want to call it, right? And these guys are specialists and they will handle it for the customer. That's the tiered model. The other way, which is actually the one that's described here on this slide, is what I call the touch and hold model. And the idea here, if I get a question that I do not know how to answer, I do not pass it on to the next level. I go get help from the next level and I get educated as how to answer the customer, and then I get back to the customer. So that's touch and hold. Now, we tend to be very familiar with the tiered model because the tiered model has been around forever and has worked very well in a lot of environments, but it's not the only one. I would recommend you use the tiered model if you get lots of easy questions and once in a while a hard one. Tiered model is good for you. If you get lots of weird, complicated questions, then touch and hold is probably better. Right? So you have a choice, and whichever choice you have, you need to create a flowchart like the one we see on this slide. The beauty of the flowchart is that it's really hard to be not exact when you do a flowchart. You will very readily see, oh, there are problems here. There is a line that goes nowhere. That's a problem. Pay attention to handoffs. Anytime that you have a switch from one group to the other, that's where problems occur, right? Write your flowchart, definitely. And then one last word about processes. In my experience, support organizations tend to be overly specialized. So we would tend to say, oh, well, we have 3 product lines, therefore we need 3 different groups of reps to handle the 3 product lines. Or, we have 3 geographies, we need to assign reps to each geography. In general, in support, a principle that you want to think about is big is beautiful. So you want to specialize as little as you can get away with. Of course, you have to specialize sometimes, right? Because not everybody can know everything. But cross-training is good, and having generalists is a good thing. Okay? So in summary, you need to have your resolution process. You have 2 choices, tiered or touch and hold, depending on what type of issues you're going to be handling. Do define it in a visual manner. It helps you figure out the holes in your process, 1. And 2, when you want to train people, most people are visual. They will very readily understand a diagram, and they will follow it. Okay, we are still in the process layer, and I wanted to do a pitch for support communities, as Rich announced at the beginning of the call, there will be a follow-up webinar on this very topic, so it really is important, right? The idea in traditional support is that we, the supplier, the vendor, we know better. So all wisdom and all information comes from us. That's obviously not true, right? So we really want customers to help each other, because the wisdom of crowds is something that's very real, right? So you want to look at support communities. This is something that may be intimidating to you. The reality is that communities are really a wonderful way to have what I call the grassroots knowledge base, or the tribal knowledge base, right? The real ways that we use the product, and the customers are the ones who know that, right? I encourage you to create your own. It's a fantastic adventure. You don't have to just think of the community as just a forum, although that's a big part. You can have blogs, you can have scheduled webinars, right? The activity we're engaged in today in this webinar, it is a community type of activity. Think about it. And I probably shouldn't be saying this in front of Rich, but it's pretty easy to do a webinar, right? Right? And it is fun for the person who is doing it. So you can do that with your customers, right? So the learning point here is, don't think that you have all the wisdom and all the knowledge of the world. Do use your customers as a resource for each other. It really works very well, especially if your product or service happens to be one that can be adopted in very many different ways. If the questions you get is, where's my order, the community won't help you, right? But if the questions that you get are, how do I do this? Has anybody tried that? Then your community is the place to go. All right. Finally, we talk about the tool. So you should not be on this step until you have thought about your process, right? But you need to get to a tool. So it used to be, I really am old enough to remember when you had to build your own tools. Okay. So step 1 for you, do not build your own tool. Do not create your own. It makes absolutely no sense. I have a grand total of 2 customers who are using their own tool and for whom it makes sense because they're using their own tools, right? But otherwise, no, there are many great tools on the market. There's no reason to consider anything but a commercial tool at this point. So what to look for? Ideally, you get to this step after you have defined your process, so you will have a very good understanding of what it is you need to track. And I would look for an integrated system that would track issues, track cases, support cases, right? Track knowledge management, and also have an integrated customer portal. This is why you can get rid of email case logging, right? Because you will have that integrated customer portal right off the bat. I would definitely go for a SaaS solution. I really don't see, especially for smaller companies, why you would necessarily consider other solutions. SaaS is very convenient. It can be deployed very quickly. It will scale with you. Let's face it, we're hoping you'll get very successful and you'll need to grow very fast, right? And then if you pick well, you should be able to have customizations that are very, very easy to do. And you really don't want to have too many customizations because it's costly and it's complicated, etc. But everybody's going to have what I call personalizations, right? So for example, what do you call a customer? Well, some of you call a customer. I call my customers clients, right? If I was a doctor, I would call my customers patients, right? You should be able to customize, personalize that very easily in the tool. You should be able to add a field here and there very easily, right? Those are the types of things you should be able to do without any effort at all. All right. Now, one last thought. If you're looking for tools and none of the tools that you consider are able to support your model easily, take it as a hint that maybe your model is a little screwy, right? If nobody can do what you're trying to do, perhaps there is something wrong in the way that you are looking at support. So pick a tool. There are many good tools on the market today, and you should be able to find one that is at the same time cost-effective and incredibly productive for you. Now, metrics, if you think about that, metrics are independent of the tool, but a good tool is going to help you very much create the metrics that you want. So what should we think about in terms of support metric? Idea number one, there is no such thing as a magic number that will tell you everything you need to know about your support organization. Okay? If you think that, then you need to take a pill or something and think otherwise, right? No, there's no magic number. If you look at one thing and one thing only, then you will have very strange behaviors to achieve that one target that you have, and that's not what you want. So an idea, and you can see that on the dashboard that is illustrating this slide, right? One idea is to always balance quality and quantity. So here, for example, we have customer satisfaction in the upper left-hand corner. That's obviously a measure of quality. If customer is satisfied, that's a very clear measure of quality. And in the lower left-hand corner, we have incident rates, which is the volume, right? So that's a quantity. So that's an example of balancing quality and quantity. Other idea about metrics. Look over time. Don't just look at one data point, one point in time. Here you can see that we have an evolution over the year, right? And it tells you a lot. If customer sat is low, but it's growing, it's very different from customer sat is low and it's been declining, right? So look at time. Create a dashboard. So here you see that we have a dashboard with just 4 things we look at. Any tool that you pick is going to have probably 165 reports that you can look at. And it would be a mistake to look at 160 things every day, right? Because you won't do it, first of all, and you won't know what to look for. So pick a dashboard. And the idea of the dashboard and the idea of metrics is absolutely essential to selecting a tool. In other words, when you look at a tool demo, don't just look at the demo itself. Ask about the reports on the dashboard, right? If there's a good dashboard, your life is going to be much, much, much better. All right, so for those of you paying very good attention, you may have noticed that there was a 5th layer, people, that I really didn't talk about very much. What's up with that? Well, I think in a way it's not as complicated and maybe not as important as some of the other things we talk about in details, but of course you're going to need people. You should pick people who ideally have had a support experience. In this economy, you should be able to hire people, right? And you should be able to be picky about whom you select. Look for people who have experience in the same type of support that you're doing. So you're supporting consumers, people who've done consumer support. You are supporting businesses, people who've supported businesses. You're supporting complex products, people who've supported complex products, right? It just has a little different vibes. And by the way, although I say here you can start with part-time, you can. You really should start thinking about full-time people once you have about 2 FTEs.
FT, before we move on, and actually we did move on, but Sarah asked an interesting question on the topic of dashboards or metrics, and that is, how do you recommend measuring customer sat, or CSAT as the pros call it? What are some of your thoughts there?
Okay, that's a very excellent question, and we could talk about this for 2 hours, but we won't. All right, so CSAT. The right answer to all questions that are asked in this webinar is it depends, right? Depends on your customers, depends on what you're doing. So I'll give you a few ideas, and then you can select what you want to do with your particular customers. What I like to do, if it fits, is to do what's called a transactional survey. The idea is at the end of each case, you just very quickly lob an email to the customer and you say, Mr. Customers, thank you so much for contacting us. Tell us, how are we doing? Lousy? Wonderful. I love the one question CSAT questionnaire right at this point in my life because it gives you more answers, right? So that's what I would do. I would use that for everything. Of course, let people, allow customers to comment. Yeah, it's not just about that one question. But that will tell you more than anything else in the world. The one question transactional survey is what I think is best.
So that's great, and guess what, folks? We're going to throw a one-question transactional survey to you at the end, and as you remember, there's a $25 Amazon gift card, so we're going to find out how we're doing, so we believe in this, so stick around for that. Thanks.
All right. So it is time for us to regroup and to work on your to-do list. Remember I told you to create a to-do list at the beginning? Well, here's a reminder. So these things may well need to be on your to-do list. Who is your support owner? You need an executive owner for support. It's really important. If you don't have one, designate one. You could do that today, by the way. Second, define the scope of support. It's the promise to customers, remember, and you need to have it even if you're not per se selling your support services. You need to define what it is that we are going to do. Now, I remember from the questions that we got that one of the big issues is going to be your support hours, right? So think long and hard about that. Design your knowledge strategy. This is because good knowledge management will give you both productivity and customer satisfaction, if you recall, right? Knowledge strategy is not just for customers, it's also for yourself internally, for support reps, especially at the beginning, because you're more likely to use part-time help. It's really important to have a good knowledge base. Continuing on, you need to think about your resolution process. Remember, you have 2 choices, tiered or touch and hold. It needs to be defined. You need to have it in a visual way so that you can spot problems, 1, and 2, use it to educate everybody. Look at support communities. Support communities are not just a fad in my way of looking at things and in my customers' experience. They really do work and customers really like participating in them. Procure a tool. Do not create your own. Do not use Excel. Hint, hint. Pick a SaaS solution. That's what you want and you will be able to grow it. And then measure success and look for a tool that will give you the metrics that you want. All right, so I want to leave some time at the end for questions. So I will very quickly go through some critical success factors. And as I go through them, think about how you do support right now and whether that particular area is an area that you should be working on. So the first idea is this idea of transparency. We are in an age when customers are going to be a little skeptical of what's happening behind the curtain, right? So the more transparent you can be, the more customers feel that they're invited into your confidence and the more customers are going to trust you. And you should do that internally as well. So publish your metrics. Sarah was asking about what do I recommend for CSAT. I didn't mention that at the time, but publish the results. That's a wonderful way to be transparent. right? If customers know today, this month, this quarter, our CSAT was 8.5 out of 10, and last quarter it was 8.4 out of 10. That's a great thing to know. You know, customers will very quickly realize that you're serious about CSAT if you're publishing it, right? Manage knowledge rather than issues. The number one problem I see in new support organizations is everybody is so busy resolving cases that nobody creates knowledge, and in so doing, you resolve the same case 100 times. Don't do that. Go for the knowledge management. Certainly use your staff flexibly, but be sure to have consistent coverage. This is why you need a support owner. Otherwise, if you are working with part-timers, you're going to have gaps, and you don't want that. And Phil, if you're trying to do 24/7, this is where your challenge is going to come from, consistent coverage. All right, we want to track all requests from the start. This is because you want to improve. You want to track knowledge, not requests, so you track the requests first. Think about it. You can all leverage a great online presence. Tools are great right now. You can look bigger than you are. All good. Just go do it. And finally, mine your data. The reason why you're tracking all requests is that you can mine the data, and you can very easily focus on, oh, well, the hot issues this week are X, Y, and Z. We need to do something about it. We need to be proactive. Remember that one of the critical functions of support is to be the voice of the customer. And you cannot be the voice of the customer unless you're mining this data. Only you have this data. Nobody else in the company has the data. Use it. All right. Just a bit of fun, and then we'll close or open for questions. Danger spots. Things I have seen a lot. Waiting too long to start a formal process. This is a recipe for chaos. Making fuzzy commitments. We'll get back to you as soon as possible. When is that? Tomorrow? Nobody knows. Being lackadaisical about response time. You really want a support organization that literally jumps on issues as they come in. And you will know that if you go walk around in a support organization. Letting backlog build up, this is going to kill you eventually. Backlog is going to choke organizations. And of course, relying on a single metric. If you have found a single metric for support, please contact me at your earliest convenience so I can show you that it's not a good one. Putting it all together on your to-do list timeline. I feel that you can go from 0 to great in 60 days. I have done it personally in 2 weeks. I don't recommend it necessarily, but you could go faster than this, right? So start with the support owner and the scope of support. Those are the first things to start with. Then move on to the definition of the processes, and eventually get to the tracking tool, customization of the tool, and designing your metrics. You can get there in 60 days. Of course, support never ends, and you will always go back and look at the 5 layers. So it's just the beginning of the journey. Questions?
Okay, we have just a couple minutes for questions, and then we're going to push out our survey. Hang on one second. We had actually I have a question. I'm going to ask my question that I'm interested in, and that is, how big does your community have to be to substantiate a community? When can we turn that on so that you're not scared that you're going to have 3 people showing up?
Oh dear. Can you ask easier question, Rich? That's a great question. Okay, so remember I said in support, big is beautiful? It is also true for communities. Big is beautiful for communities. So if you have very, very, very few customers, you might say, oh my God, it'll never work. Now remember, what matters is not just the size, but it's the level of interest of the community, right? So you can have a community that's composed of very few people and still have a dialogue, right? A good test of a community is whether you have at least 1 posting per day. Right? So think about it. If you think your community can support 1 post or more per day, you're probably good. Now, reality being what it is, I think if you have fewer than 100 potential participants, it's probably too small. Let's face it. But starting at 100, you could be very successful.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. Obviously, we're coming up to the top of the hour, and we want to respect your time. At this point, we're going to push the survey out. The folks in the room are certainly working on the chat questions, so we're going to try to get to every question possible. And if your question doesn't get answered, please feel free to reach out to your account executive at Salesforce. They can get in touch with a sales engineer if it's a technical question, or we can certainly get the question over to Francoise if we need some of her advice. With that, I just want to remind you that we have 2 additional webinars in this series, and it's every Wednesday, basically, every other week. So the next one is September 8th, Implementing Best Practices, How to Become a Customer Service Model of Success. So that's our next one, 2 weeks from today, same time. And with that, we want to thank you for your time, and I hope that it was a valuable experience. And if you could just complete our survey to let us know how we're doing so that we can improve, we'd appreciate it. Thanks very much, everyone.